Welcome to Discovering. Tonight is part 2 of building a traditional longbow.
A bow shaped just like this, comes off the form, but the limbs are the same width all the way down.
Plus, we learn the basics of shooting a longbow.
As you can see, a good follow through. I hold my bow up until my arrow hits the target.
So sit back and relax. It's Monday night, and it's time for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
So traditional archery, why? What's the fascination with it? I guess the big thing with it is just the simplicity of the bow. You know, you take just a simple bow like this, a simple longbow. There's not much to it. There's nothing to adjust, really. The only adjustments on a traditional bow are what's called the brace height or the fistomile, which is the distance from here to here. And the point where you knock your arrow on the string, you make those adjustments to tune the bow. Longbows are a little bit lighter generally. They're a really simple bow, and the nice thing about them is, you know, you can start a youngster out with a bow that's comfortable for them to draw, and they may only draw it back, you know, 22, 23 inches, when they're young. You know, they grow into the bow instead of growing out of it like you would with a compound bow, where you got to start changing parts and whatnot. So the beauty of a traditional bow is there's no set draw length on it. It's whatever you draw, and the bow will still work just fine. It's just the weight, the more you draw it back, the heavier it gets. The other thing about it is there's really nothing to go wrong with it. You're not going to have parts break and fall off and come loose and make noise. So a much simpler, traditional form of archery. These bows can be extremely accurate, despite no sights or anything. They're just using your natural abilities. Before I put glue on, I dry fit everything. Make sure everything fits the way I want it. For this particular bow, I'm using this. This is a sheet veneer stock, and these are really thin. These are only 20 thousandths thick. So what I'm looking for here before I glue it up, that I don't have any dips or bumps in this ramp, so it's a nice straight smooth line. Everything fits nice and tight. This is a piece of clear fiberglass. The green is just protective tape, so I don't get glue on the surface of the glass. What I'll do now is I'll lay these out on the table, wipe everything down, and the reason I do that, it gets any dust and dirt that could cause a glue failure. Getting ready to mix up the glue. This is a 2-part epoxy, probably one of the primary ones used by bowyers. It's a very strong glue, but it stays flexible. So this stuff, you just smear it on here, try and get it nice and even. The biggest thing I gotta watch for is any dry spots. You don't want those because that'll cause more problems down the road. It'll probably delaminate on you. Just stack them up. Glue on both surfaces on everything. That's why we call it the stack. Once these are all glued together and it's done, these are laminated together. They basically just become one piece of wood. All right, so that half is ready to go on the form. This one I'm working on here is the top limb, and that'll be the bottom limb. We got the glue on all the limb parts. Now we just got to glue up the riser, and I'll tape that in place on the form. What this does is it pulls it down into the form. Tape here just to hold it. Gets it down so everything is together nice and tight. Tape doesn't want to play nice with me today. You want to make sure that these ends are all down nice and tight. Okay, so it's taped down. This helps keep it from getting glued to the form or squeeze out glue dripping all over the inside of the bow oven. Now, this is just a pressure strip that goes between the bow and the fire hose. And what that does is it just helps distribute the pressure evenly. This is just a piece of 1.5 inch fire hose with a couple of aluminum plugs in it. The top holds pressure, back pressure against this. This will inflate and push all those laminations down together tight. Get that on there. When I air these up, I go slowly. And that'll keep everything in alignment. I'm just gonna go along like this, pull that down, and that glue just goes in between those 2 layers of plastic. Otherwise you get a big thick edge of it right here along the bottom edge of the limb, and it makes it harder to get the bow out of the form. A lot of self-learning, but I also have a lot of friends that are bowyers that I could call for advice and whatnot. This bow's in the form, glued up. I got a little bit more time to air it up, and then it's gonna go in the oven in about an hour, and it'll bake for 4 hours. And that glue on that bow will be fully cured. After that, we'll shut the oven off, let it cool down as the oven cools. So what happens when I take this out of the form is just reverse the process. I strip all this off, take the top off the form. A bow shaped just like this comes off the form, but the limbs are the same width all the way down. I lay a template for you can see that limb's tapered. I lay a template on here, mark it out, and I cut that excess off, probably from about here up. And I sand these down to that line on both sides, so it gets my limbs nice and uniform. So from this point forward, there's a couple more steps. This part right here, you can see there's a couple more layers on there. It's called just a handle overlay. It's basically decorative. Doesn't really serve any function. I've built bows without them on there, and it doesn't matter. And then the tips, all the tips are reinforced with the G10 material I talked about, this stuff here. If you don't reinforce these tips with G10 or phenolic, the fast flight string material, you can actually cut into the limb and break it. And then some pieces of wood to give it some decorative finish. Just clamp that in there, and I mark my string grooves off of that line. So I just use a chainsaw file. These will be the same depth on each side. These are just very, very much roughed in at this point. My love for archery and building bows and love for working with wood. These two go together like butter and onions. All right, so there's our string grooves. Traditional bows generally use what's called a Flemish twist. You can see how that's all braided together. So longbow strings, like I said, is 3 inches shorter than the bow. So for this one, I'm going to want a 59-inch string. A number of ways to string a bow. There's only one way to do it properly, and that's using a bow stringer. It's the safest way to do it. I'll show you how these work. You just slide that over the top limb. Make sure your string's in the grooves good and it's centered. Then you just slide this out. Then you just simply stand on the string and lift the bow up, and it very evenly bends the limbs, equal pressure, and you can put that string into place. And so there it is, strung up. So this bow is ready to build out. The only thing I'd do is throw it on a scale, see what the weight is. So right now it's about 45.5 pounds at 28 inches. As I finish this bow, it's going to lose a few pounds yet. The other thing we do here is we check the tiller. What I'm doing is I'm measuring from this line is right at the end of the fade out on the riser. You can see, it's hard to tell because it's all ash, but the end of the riser is right there at that line and right there at that line. So I measure the distance between the limb and the string on both sides. So I got 7 inches there, and I got 6 3/4 there, so that's off a little bit. So what that means is this limb's a little bit stiffer than this limb, And I actually want this limb stiffer than the top. And that has to do with just the geometry of the bow and where you hold it and where the shelf is. So the limbs are working equally. I'll have to take a little material off this limb here. So next thing we got to do now, we got to unstring it. We're going to put a tip overlay and a handle overlay on it, and I'll show that process. This is just going to be a one piece. Sometimes I'll stack 2 or 3 different layers on them. They can be wood, they can be G10, they can be antler. There's a lot of different materials you can use. So I use super glue most of the time. Sometimes I'll use smooth on if I'm out of super glue, but I put quite a bit on here. So get that relatively in place. Now we just got to do the tip. So I'll do this on both ends, put these tips on, and then this will sit for several hours before I'll ever think about working them. And what this G10 overlay does is it reinforces the tip of the bow. Like I said, some I'll put another piece of decorative wood or a couple pieces of wood on there decoratively, or a real basic bow, this one. So
You may have noticed that we keep switching bows to save time and show the various steps. We did skip shaping the tips for time and to avoid dust again.
we're ready to shape the riser. This is what makes this look like a bow. I got a line here for where my arrow shelf goes, and it's marked down to the center of the bow. All my bows are cut to center. And then I just got to take this little wedge out. I'll shape the arrow shelf. I don't leave this flat. This is shaped in a radius. This is just an all ash riser. There's nothing fancy about this one at all. This is gonna be a right-handed bow, so a right-handed shooter is gonna hold the bow in their left hand and draw with their right. So the shelf goes on the left. So whenever you look at a traditional bow from the belly side here, if the shelf's on the left, it's a right-handed bow and vice versa. But we'll go ahead and start shaping this one out. I'll start by cutting in the grip locator, and then a lot of this will just get worked down, and you'll see it goes relatively quickly. Quite a ways to go yet. You can see that starting to take the shape, working in that grip locator. Now it's just a matter of rounding this stuff over and cleaning it up. I'll take a little off and check it and see how it feels in the hand and make any changes as I go. Take some material off here, kind of roll this in, and a little bit on this side, and then hit it with the sanders. Once I get done with the band file and some of the other stuff, then a lot of my detail stuff I do with rasps. I like the rasp because it gives me a lot more control. With the band file and some of the other stuff, you may accidentally take too much material off. You can see here I got a little bit of a transition I got to work out, and I like to do this here with a rasp. In pretty good shape. It's just I'm going to go over it with the orbital sander. Fairly roughed out. It's all just fine detail work now, just slowly sanding and scraping and whatnot. But you can see that from where we started with a blocky piece of wood, it's starting to look like a longbow. This is just a basic ash bow. I'm going to show you what this looks like. If I just put a clear coat on it with no stain, you'll see there's actually some color to it. It's a nice honey color to it, and it's got a lot of green in there. And then I could take this and dye it some different colors. I don't use stains like like your normal woodworking stains. I use an alcohol-based dyes. A lot more vivid color. They penetrate much better. And being alcohol-based, they dry within seconds. At this point, we'd round over the limbs. Like I said, I got a little work to do on the tiller on it. That could take a couple hours sometimes. Sometimes I'm slow at that. I take my time. So that could take me 15 minutes, could take me a couple hours. It just depends on the bow, how it wants to act. I got some work to do on these tips, but as you can see, at this point we have a bow. And I could string this bow right now and take it outside and shoot it.
So now that we know the basics of building a traditional longbow, it's time to learn the basics of shooting one.
When you shoot a traditional bow, it really truly isn't much different than pointing your finger. My finger's just below the shelf, and the arrow's gonna sit right there. If you imagine if I had a laser pointer taped to my finger and I pointed it at a spot, just my natural hand-eye coordination would put that laser pretty close to where I'm pointing, to maybe right on the money. It'd be really close. So you're basically just pointing your finger and using your natural hand-eye coordination, similar to throwing a baseball. You just look, you learn the trajectory of that arrow, how it arcs through the air. Yes, there's a learning curve to it, but like I said, once you get it down, it's not hard to maintain, as long as you shoot. Anything you do to do well, you have to practice. That's not a lie. I don't care if it's playing a musical instrument, shooting a bow, shooting a gun, casting your fly rod, you gotta practice. And once you get that system down, it becomes second nature to you. So basically, I'm just looking at a spot, and when I shoot, I just look at one of the old arrow holes, and that's what I look at. But you just draw them back to the corner of your mouth, or wherever you choose to anchor. It's called your anchor point, and you want to do that consistently. I kind of liken your anchor point to the rear sight on a rifle. If you don't use the rear sight, you're not going to be as accurate. You have that anchor, pick a spot, and that's all there is to it. So you can see a good follow through. I hold my bow up until my arrow hits the target. So just like throwing a ball or anything else, you want a good follow through. So a lot of people tell me that, that it's hard on the shoulder or their arm gets tired. And when you're shooting, you're actually using my back muscles to draw. I'm kind of squeezing my back muscles together like this. And that makes it a lot easier. Plus your draw length will be a little bit longer if you do that. Good archery form is important, just like any other sport. You want to be consistent in how you shoot. Start out close, and as you get better, work your way back.
Let's see if this is as easy as John makes it look.
And then you're going to put your arrow just under that little brass doohickey. You're going to want to turn so you're kind of facing your camera.
Okay.
There you go.
All right.
And just you want to tip the bow a little bit like that. It's called canting the bow.
Okay.
That way you get a nice clear sight picture. Just pick a spot on that leaf. Try and bring it back. You're going to want to grab that like right in that first crease.
Here?
You're way too deep. You're going to want to be right in that first.
Oh, okay,
right about there. Yeah.
Okay.
Right in that first crease of your knuckle. First joint.
Okay.
And then just bring it back as best as you can. You want to take that finger off the arrow. That's why you want to cant the bow.
Okay. So I take the finger off there?
Take that finger off.
Okay.
Yep. It won't fly very good if you do that.
I suppose.
Okay. Grip it and rip it. A little lot, but you know what? You just keep doing that 10,000 times and you'll be an expert.
All right. So right there.
Yep.
Take my finger off there.
Yep.
Oop. And I mean, drawing back, you said draw back as far as I can?
Yep. That one might be a little bit heavy for you. Look at there. See, you're already grouping. Just like you're pointing your finger at that leaf.
Once I had the basics down, I moved back a bit, and I didn't want to stop shooting. I was determined to hit that leaf, which I did not. It will take some practice and a bit more concentration.
This is what I like doing. Somebody that's never shot a longbow before and getting them started, and then the more you shoot it, the bigger that grin gets. And
Another great way to practice is something John calls stump shooting.
I like to come out and just shoot at stumps and leaves and stuff. It's the best practice there is. This time of year, you may bang into a snowshoe hare or a grouse to try and get a poke at, which is also a lot of fun. I love hunting bunnies with the bow in the wintertime. So we're just gonna take a walk down through some of the trails here and shoot some stumps and some leaves and stuff. What I use for this tip here is called a judo point. You can see it's got these little springs on it. And what they do is when it hits the grass, they kind of kick the arrow up so it doesn't submarine into the grass and it's gone forever. But you can still lose these, but they're a little bit harder. Stump shooting, you just walk along and say, all right, there's a leaf down there I want to hit. And I shot a little over that one, but pick one little clump of it, and that's what I'm going to aim for. If that was a hunting shot at a deer, it's in the vitals. So this is to me is the best practice there is, and it's a lot of fun. Got it. Turn around, I look for my next. I could do this all day long.
That's all for tonight, and I hope to see you right back here next week for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.